Hi guys, I'm Jason White. This is my channel, Jason's Weird Reads. Thank you for watching. So this is my 500 sub Q&A. These are the questions and answers. I think I might do a separate video on who's gonna win the gift card. But and these questions also might be split up a little bit because I'm shooting this a little bit early in anticipation of releasing it when I want to, and so if any other questions come in, I'm just going to add them at the end. So let's get to it. And thank you to everyone who asked a question. There's, I think, 31 separate questions, and some people asked double questions, so thank you. All right, so question number 1, Amy Gets Lit asks, what fantasy world would you want to live in? That's easy. I would love to live at Hogwarts, so Harry Potter land. Bald Book Geek asks, what's a favorite classic of yours? And I think I answered this in my over 30 tag. I'm not sure, but I went with Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky, and I think I'll stick with that for now. I haven't read them in a while, but then again, I haven't read Crime and Punishment in a while. It's just that Crime and Punishment, it made me think more. And I like books that make me think. Okay, Regina St. Clair, she asked 2 questions. So question 1 is, who is your favorite fantasy character? That's a tough one. I don't know how to answer that. I'm gonna take the cheap way out and just say Rand al'Thor or Tyrion from Game of Thrones. One of those two. And as a writer, do you ever think about writing your own great fantasy epic? And the answer to that is yes, I have thought of that many times, but to be honest, I don't think I have the focus to create something quite so vast. I sort of like sticking to the shorter type stuff, but I do have an idea for a very weird sort of epic fantasy, and I don't know if it would even actually fall into epic fantasy if I were to write it, but we'll see what happens. Carol Marie Reads, she asks, what's the strangest book you've ever read? God, that's a good question. You know what? In all honesty, I think some of the strangest things I've ever read has come from Laird Barron. He writes a lot of short stories. He's not writing quite so much weird, horrific fiction now. He writes mostly crime fiction. He's concentrating on a crime series that he has out with one of the big 5 publishers, I believe. I could be wrong about that, but he wrote a bunch of collections of short stories, and they were all just like the weirdest. Like, I'm gonna go with Hallucination is in the title. I can't remember the exact play with words he does with that. I'll post it here so we're clarified. But that is definitely one of the weirdest and darkest stories I've ever read. Carla's Book Bitch. Let me see here. 2 questions. First question, what's the first book that got you into reading? Oh no, sorry, there's 3 questions here. But the first one is, what's the first book that got you into reading? Well, I read books before this one, but what really hooked me was these Vietnam War stories. It's a strange thing to say, but they're called, it's a series done by Golden Eagle, a publisher called Golden Eagle. I don't think they exist anymore, but they did like Mac Bullen type, or not Mac Bullen type, they published Mac Bullen stories, if you're familiar with those. And the series I read was Vietnam Ground Zero, and basically you're following a Captain Gerber, and a lieutenant, I think his name, Lieutenant Letterman. And I read like 4 or 5 of these books, and for some reason when I was 11 years old I was like hooked on learning about the Vietnam War, even if I was reading trash. I don't understand that, but there it is. Anyways, that's what got me hooked, and then from there I read Swan Song by Robert R. McCammon, and I forgot about the Vietnam books, and I started reading horror, and that's pretty much where it started for me. I was about 11 years old. Tim Hortons or Starbucks? Timmy's. To be honest with you, Starbucks kind of confuses me with all their weird names, and $5 for a coffee? No thanks. And question number 3, do you have a favorite snack or drink that you like to have while reading? I don't. I don't like to eat when I read. I don't know why that is. Some people can read and eat their dinner or their lunch, breakfast. I can't, unless it's an audiobook. But I can drink, and my favorite would be coffee or tea, and if not that, then Diet Pepsi. I drink those too much, all 3 of them, and should be more water, I guess, but what are you gonna do? So yeah, I like to drink, but I don't like to eat while I read. So thank you, Carla. We move on to Scott, Book Invasion, and he asks 2 questions. The first question is, what's the strangest movie you've ever seen? I have to go with Videodrome on that. That movie is just batshit crazy. There's also a story that was really weird, I think by John Carpenter. It was a TV episode, though, for Masters of Horror called Cigarette Burns. That was pretty... It's kind of in the same vein, but it was really, really weird. So, well, definitely Videodrome. Man, that movie. Whew. I gotta watch it again sometime soon. It's just so weird. And question number 2, do you believe in parallel universes? No, and yes. I don't really believe in anything, to be honest with you. I'm the type of person who needs, like, scientific evidence in order to believe in anything, concrete anyway. Otherwise, I just wonder. You know, I like to sit down and wonder about these types of things. I'm kind of interested in reading more fiction that has parallel universes, because I like the idea of 2 people meeting somehow where reality got really thin, and they're from two different realities, and then I think this would make an interesting love story, honestly, if I was to ever write one. And that's strange that I just thought of that, but but you know, them trying to get in touch with each other again, but they can't because they don't actually exist in their own reality. There's stories like that out there, actually, now that I think about it. But you know, it's fun to think about, but does it exist? I don't know. It's like one of the big questions, the meaning of life. Alright, so Chick's Bookshop, she asks, is there any place you'd like to visit that you haven't yet? And are you keen on traveling? I do like to travel, but at the same time I hate it. I hate the hustle, honestly. I'm very much a routine guy. I need my routine. And, you know, having to go on a trip is obviously it disrupts that, but you know, at the same time, it's nice to break the mundane existence that is me, that is my life. So both yes and no. Madeline Swan asks, oh, I should have put this with, but she asked the same question, what's the weirdest book you've ever read? And I went with the Laird Barron story, hallucina, I can't remember the name of it. You know, and I'm interested in reading some of your work, Madeline, because I know you write some pretty weird stuff, and I like weird, and it's just basically me trying to get to it, trying to clear the slate a bit. God. Okay. Dor de Lectura, I'm pretty sure I pronounced that wrong, asks, what's your biggest fear? My biggest fear, honestly, is death, because I don't know what comes after. I don't know what's next, honestly. I don't believe in heaven necessarily. As I said earlier, I sort of need the scientific evidence to back that up. And there is actually scientific evidence that there is life after death, but I don't know if I buy into that exactly just yet. And not every scientist does. There's some interesting studies that have been done on this and books that have been written. But, until everyone is like, all the scientists are like, yes, it exists, then I can't. But so what I fear is it's not necessarily the unknown. What I fear is oblivion, nothingness. It's inconceivable to me that one day I could close my eyes, not open them again, and not think again, not have any experiences whatsoever again, and just simply not exist. That scares me a lot. All right, so Carly, Mermaid Lover, she asks, what is my favorite Stephen King short story collection? And I'm going to go with Skeleton Crew on that. Either that or Night Shift. They're both really nasty. And, but I when I read this question, the first answer that came to my mind was Skeleton Crew, so I'll go with that. Time for Books asks, what's your favorite thing to read when you were a child? She asked two questions here. That was the first. When I was a child, I read a lot of Jim Davis comics, Garfield comics. That was like my favorite thing for years. Those books that he used to release, these books that came like this long and yay thick, and they were all comic strips, like 6-panel comic strips on each page, and I loved those. I don't know how many volumes he released, but I had a lot of them, like 10 to 20 somewhere, and I just read those a lot. I wasn't really into comics ever, but those I were. I don't know what it was about Garfield, but I fucking loved Garfield. And so my favorite author as a child would have been Jim Davis, and that was her second question. What my favorite authors as a child. I didn't really read too much on my own until I was about 11. So if you're still counting that, then I'm going to go with Eric Helm. He wrote those Vietnam War books I was talking about. One Sleepy Reader asks, where have you traveled in your life? And out of all the places you have been, what was your favorite place? Okay, so I've been to British Columbia. I live in Ontario. British Columbia is pretty far away. I've been to Buffalo, which isn't that far away. I've been to Florida. Went to the Universal and Disneyland there. And I've also been to Brighton over in the UK, Great Britain. And I would say my favorite out of all those, man, it would be a tie between Florida and Great Britain, but I'm going to go with Great Britain because, and Brighton, because I'm like an Anglophile. I obsess over British life and culture. And I've always wanted to go to Brighton. And I went for the World Horror Convention in 2010, and we stayed longer than the convention was for, and we just explored Brighton. It's a beautiful little city, and I loved it there. Honestly, I could probably live there. Okay, Asher Skylark asks, if you have a time machine, and you have the opportunity to bring one person back today, who would it be and why? I would bring H.P. Lovecraft back. And I would smack him in the head and show him, look at all this racist bullshit that's going on. It's not right. You got to go back to your timeline and make amends with all the racist crap. And, it'd just be cool to hang out with H.P. Lovecraft. He wasn't the reclusive person that everyone seems to think he was. He had a lot of friends, and he wrote letters to them, and he also traveled to go visit them. So I think it would be cool just to hang out with H.P. Lovecraft and talk with him about cosmic horror. I'm sure that you could talk with him for hours and hours about that. Okay, Stacy Stories. She asks, will you try to get your kid to love horror as well? And this is something I would love, but I don't know if he's going to go for it ever. When he was younger, he's 5 right now. He turned 6 in October. When he was younger, he loved Scooby-Doo, and I was like, yes, he's gonna love horror. But then suddenly he became afraid of Scooby-Doo. It scared him, and he doesn't like monsters, and he doesn't like scary things. But when I was a kid, I was very afraid. I was even worse than he was. So that stopped when I was around 9, and I became obsessed with horror. So maybe there's a chance. He's probably a little too young right now anyway. But I'm hoping that he turns around. And there's actually a funny story recently. He didn't like my music. I like this droney, sort of heavy doom metal music, and he doesn't hate it. He doesn't yell at me to turn it off most times anyway. But I put on some 9 Inch Nails recently, and he started freaking out. He loves it. So there's hope. There is hope. Moon Rabbit. She asks, if you woke up one morning and found yourself imprisoned in a Siberian gulag, what's one book you would wish to have hidden under your pillow? First of all, I don't know if I'd be doing much reading, because I'd be crying for my life. I'd be like, no, please don't hurt me. Let me go, please. But, you know, if I did have the energy to read, I think I would want... you know what, I'm going to go with the Stephen King short story collection. Maybe not quite so dark as his earlier stuff, but maybe Nightmares and Dreamscapes, because there's some funny stories in there. And it's one of my favorites too. So that's, and you know, there's a variety of things going on in there because it's a collection of short stories. So I wouldn't be just stuck with just one story. I could like decide to read one today and maybe another one tomorrow, and I could read that same one again the day after that, and so on. If Guimarães, I probably butchered that. This person asks, if you were asked to pick your top 3 books mentioned in Paperbacks from Hell by Grady Hendrix, what would they be? Oh god. Hang on here. I gotta do some research. So I went and got it and did a quick leaf through, and there's quite a few in here that you know, picking just 3 is like, ugh. Okay, so I ended up picking 4, I think, because there's 2 on one page here that kind of feels like I'm cheating. But Fever Dream by George R. R. Martin, and Live Girls by Ray Garton. And there's also Books of Blood by Clive Barker. This has like the first volume, and it's a cover I've never seen before, but still pretty cool. And also a book that I've had forever and ever. I don't know where it is right now. If that hurts. Look at this, that's nasty. There's the book. Oh, Cypher's in here too. Jesus, I thought that was the 90s. There it is, Ghoul by Michael Slade. I've had this book, I don't know how or why, but since I was a kid. It just sat there. Okay, so Linda's World of Books asks, what bookish place would you like to spend a day in? And I kind of answered this, I think, with the first question. And I'm just going to use it again, because definitely Hogwarts. I would love to live there, never mind to spend a day there. Daniel Shabola, he asks, is there a book you would like to see adapted to a film or TV series? And I would like to see more weird fiction, honestly, adapted, because I think, honestly, weird is getting more popular, and I think, I mean, Lovecraftian horror is really, has become pretty big, but just weird fiction itself, I think it's getting bigger than it was. It's getting more popular, and I hope to one day see it be, you know, not necessarily mainstream, but really popular. And I would like to see, you know, some more Laird Barron stuff adapted, but also Michael Griffin and John Padgett. That would be really cool. If you were to, you could definitely, I think, adapt some of his stuff. Not all of it, but some of it. Actually, you could probably do a fair number of creative things with his short stories. But, you know, that's my answer. More weird fiction. Two of a Kind asks, what was the book that made you fall in love with reading? Damn, I should have paired this up too. But yeah, definitely it was the Vietnam War book. So Todd the Librarian asks 3 questions. And the first question is, do you ever root for another hockey team besides the Maple Leafs? And yes, I do, actually. Maple Leafs are always number 1 for me. But I also like rooting for the Penguins. Believe it or not, Montreal. Mostly when they're not playing the Leafs, and if they're in the playoffs and the Leafs are out, then I'll definitely root for those two. There's teams that I absolutely hate, though. I hate Ottawa. I hate Winnipeg. And I'm not a big fan of Boston. I don't hate Boston, but right now the Leafs are playing Boston in the series, and I'm all jittery about it because the Leafs never do well against Boston in the playoffs. And so I just know they're going to lose. Ugh. Alright, question number 2 from him. Who is your favorite hockey player of all time? And as a caveat, he asks me to also pick a favorite one from now. So my favorite of all time is Wayne Gretzky. I used to watch him all the time when I was a kid, and I used to watch him play when he was a member of the Oilers, the Edmonton Oilers, and I absolutely fucking loved watching him play. And right now I'm gonna go with Matthews from the Leafs, because he's just he's a great player, and the Leafs have him. Hey, you can't go wrong. And question number 3, Labatt or Molson? Oh, that's a tough... Actually, you know what? I'm going to go with Labatt. And this is a totally Canadian question, because Canadians are known for their... especially around here, it used to be all Molson Canadian beer that everyone would drink all the time, and I don't like it, honestly. It's just not... It's got a certain flavor to it that I guess people are attracted to, but I don't like. Labatt can be hit and miss with me because I make many beers just like Molson does. I like Labatt's Ice and Maximum, but honestly, I really like drinking craft beers and exploring. I also like Stella Artois quite a bit, and Coors. Coors? I like Coors too. But I guess that's not really answering the question. My answer would be Labatt. Okay, Melissa Harbison asks, what got you into reading, watching horror? There's an interesting story to this. As I mentioned earlier, I was terrified of anything that was just out of the ordinary when it came on TV. I'm talking like even operating shows, like, I don't know, those hospital shows where they'd operate on someone. Once the patient went into the operating room, I was out of there, and I was afraid of the Incredible Hulk. Whenever the guy, I can't remember his name, started to change into the Incredible Hulk, I was out of there, and I was just afraid of anything that ever since 9 years old and onwards I absolutely loved. And what happened was one day I was just like, why does this stuff... I was like 9 years old. I was like, why does this stuff scare me so much? And I wanted to kind of confront it. And so for my birthday, I was like 9 or 10. I asked my mom to rent me one of the Friday the 13th movies. And surprisingly, she did. She was pretty good about that kind of stuff. I think she wanted to educate me on things using movies. And this is one example. But so I watched it, and that's she got me Friday the 13th Part 4, the final chapter, and I was in love. I guess I was ready to move past my fears and in that regard, and I embraced it from then on. And that movie still remains, I don't know, that's my first horror movie. Jamie reads, she asks, what's your favorite read so far this year? Oof. Let me look up here what I've read this year. I've read a lot of great books this this year so far. And it's really hard for me to pin down just one. I would like to go with Wheel of Time, because it's, you know, I read it with older eyes than the times I read it before, and I picked out so many more details and had more of an appreciation for that type of thing this time around. But I'm going to have to go with The Rust Maidens by Gwendolyn Keist, because if not that, then her collection of short stories and her smile will untether the universe. Both those books are just so incredibly well written. They're beautiful, and I want to read her forever now. Alex from Hey Little Thrifter asks, what are some films you love to watch over and over again? Well, one of them is definitely Friday the 13th Part 4, final chapter, but there's others. The Thing, John Carpenter's The Thing, I would say is my favorite favorite movie, period. I've seen this movie probably more times than that Friday the 13th movie. I absolutely love it. It's almost a perfect movie in my opinion. Also, you know, because of my weird obsession with Vietnam, there's Platoon. I've seen that movie countless times too. I love that movie. And there are other movies, but those definitely come to the top, because lately, like the last 3 or 4 or 5 years, I haven't really been rewatching too many movies. But those are always my go-to. Oh, there's one more, definitely. I can't forget this one, and that's Day of the Dead. George Romero's Day of the Dead. That movie is just so much fun. It's my favorite zombie film. And Return of the Living Dead, that one too. That was my first zombie film, actually, Return of the Living Dead. I absolutely love that film. It's so much fun. Same with Day of the Dead. Day of the Dead, it's over the top a little bit with the characters, but I think it works for the film. It's just so much fun, man. I've seen all those movies so many times, it's ridiculous. Lacey from Turn the Page and the Library. This is the only time I caught this. They both asked the same question, and what's the scariest book you've ever read? I'm going to go with Tim Curran's The Underdwelling. This book actually gave me a nightmare, and I don't get nightmares from books. At least I never used to. And I think what happened was, I was getting older, and I used to read a lot, before going to bed. And as I was getting older, I started to doze while I was reading, and this has become more common now for me. I don't know how I do it, but I can read and doze at the same time, but I have to stop, obviously, and for obvious reasons. But what my brain does, it sort of takes the story that I'm reading and turns it into a dream, and it's very weird. But it will turn it into its own dreamlike reality that makes its own sort of sense, but actually really has nothing to do with the story I'm reading. But the first time this happened to me was Tim Curran's Underdwelling. And I started to doze right at an exciting, scary part, and my unconscious mind just sort of latched onto that, and I started dreaming about it, and I just woke up like that. And that book has so many creepy things to it. Definitely check out Tim Curran if you haven't, because he knows how to create really interesting monsters, and also he's very good when he wants to. He can scare you, and that's very rare for me. The return card asks, what is something you like to do other than read? I like to listen to music. Big music fan. Watching movies. I love to watch movies. I like to hang out with my kid and my wife, of course, and make YouTube videos, honestly, and write. I don't write full time, and by that I mean I don't write every day, but I would like to write more. I would just like to leave something behind of the crazy thoughts that go through my head. And I do have some stories out there though, and you can look for them. But yeah, so writing should have probably been the first answer, but I don't know. I was brain farting. Okay, Alex Black, she asks, what's the best weird book you've ever read and the worst weird book you've ever read? Well, I already answered the best weird book. I'm going with Hallucinogenia That's the name, by Laird Barron. And the worst weird book that I've ever read would probably be, not a book, but a short story by H.P. Lovecraft where he decided to go all racist. And there's two of them. One is very well known, called The Horror at Red Hook. And there's one, in my opinion, that's much worse than that. And there's a poem that he wrote that's just absolutely disgusting. But so I'm gonna go with that as my answer, because a lot of weird fiction is done in short stories. There's not too many novels, either novellas or short stories. Those are like where weird fiction thrives. And I don't think you're ever gonna find a 1,000-page tome of one story that's weird fiction. I mean, you might, but I don't know. It would take like a Stephen King type person to do that. Carly Adair asks, did you ever read the Goosebumps series? And no, I haven't. I grew up in a strange sort of time where when the Goosebumps started being popular, at least I felt like I was too old for them. I'm actually more interested in reading them now, because I can appreciate the fun that they are. Back when I was younger, I was pretentious, and I thought they were just garbage. Garbage, pure garbage. It's not Stephen King or Clive Barker, that kind of thing. But now, I'm like, no, this is fun. I mean, the weird thing about me is the older I get, the more I appreciate having fun. I don't know why that is, but there you have it. So I never read them. I have read them recently, though, because I have read them to my son, and at least one book, and he doesn't really pay attention too much, but he seemed to like it, I guess. But it wasn't like a big hit, But I have a bunch of them now, and I want to collect a lot of the older ones and whatnot. Okay, the Paper Traveler, does your wife have any interest in being in any videos with you? And that is a big no. She's one of those people who runs when the cameras come out. She doesn't like her picture being taken, never mind being on a movie or a YouTube video. But, I wish that she would. I think, because me and her, we have this fun banter. And I've always wanted to kind of capture that on either a podcast or a video or something, but I've talked to her about it, and she's like, you can just see the fear in her eyes, and so I'm not going to pressure her into that. But yeah, the answer is a big no. She really does not like that. Nikki from I Read Past My Bedtime asks 3 questions. Question number 1. What do you do for a living? If you're comfortable answering that. I can't answer that, because if I did, I'd have to hunt you down and kill you. That's at least the answer, right? I work a boring factory job. And, it's a job, actually, that makes me feel guilty, because I contribute, just in my job, to the dying of this planet and climate change. I make plastic bags for food and whatnot. So what I do is I'm a extrusion operator, and if you don't know what that is, look it up here on YouTube. It's actually pretty interesting, but I think honestly it's something you're going to see go away because of people who cannot throw garbage where it belongs, and it's clogging up the oceans. The governments, as far as I know, at least they should be if they're not. I know there's some controversy on this, but there shouldn't be a controversy. We need to clean this shit up. And you know what? If people would clean this stuff up, then my job wouldn't be at risk. And I think, honestly, it is at risk. We're getting near the end here. Rob Shepard. He was on my podcast once. He's a really great author. I highly suggest you go check out his work. He asks, so what is your go-to book to return to when you want to enjoy a familiar read? There's a few. I've read Swan Song quite a few times. The Stand by Stephen King. There's John Irving books that I've talked about, like A Widow for 1 Year. It's also The Fourth Hand, which I've read a lot. A Prayer for Owen Meany. And those are the biggest ones. So it's not just one. I don't have a go-to. I have you could say I could have like a small shelf of go-tos. And Dustin Hicks. So far this is the last, unless anyone else comes in, and I really do apologize for the length of this video. But Dustin, I tend to ramble. This is why I started my channel though, because I just love talking about this shit. So Dustin Hicks, he asks, if you could only read the books of one author from now until death, who would it be? And I'm going to go with Stephen King on that. Stephen King, I wouldn't say he's my favorite writer. He's definitely up there. But he writes a variety of stuff, and he's written a lot. So if I was just to read one author, it would definitely be him, because I'd get my horror, I'd get a little science fiction, I'd get a little fantasy. Actually, quite a bit of fantasy if you count Dark Tower. And I could totally just live off Stephen King. So maybe I should say that he's my favorite writer. So I'm interrupting here because I did get another question. Sorry for the shaky cam there. My little stand for this broke on me. Anyways, but before I get to that final question, I forgot to address Nikki's two other questions. Nikki from I Read Past My Bedtime, she asked me 3 questions. The first was, what do I do for a living? The second question is, what's your favorite color? My favorite color is green. I just love green. I don't know why. And the third question is favorite order from good old Timmy's, which is Tim Hortons. And I'm pretty much straight up double guy, except I usually get sweetener instead of sugar, because, well, I kind of prefer it, honestly. And the final question comes from Josie Leon, and she asks, when you travel, do you visit libraries/bookstores? And we do tend to visit bookstores, but not libraries. I would like to go visit libraries in other countries, though. That might be really interesting. And if I have any favorites, and no, not really. I have favorite used bookstores around here, but I haven't really traveled the world and visit a whole bunch of used bookstores that I really like. So thank you for asking. Alright, so I'm going to close out this video now. Thank you everyone who asked a question. My very next video will be the winner. And I will maybe show you the process of that. And if not, then I'll just be like, hey, this person won. So thanks everyone who participated, who asked me a question. There was a lot more than I thought. I thought maybe I'd get... Well, I put the question out a few weeks ago originally, and I got 6 questions. I was like, oh, that's pretty good. I'm happy with that. But I wanted to put out a video because I was creeping up on 600 right now, and it's also my first year anniversary, so I was like, let's make this a thing, you know? And so thanks to everyone who participated, and when and if I reach 1,000, I'm going to do one of those fun assumption videos. So that may happen soon. It might take a while. It took me a year to reach 500, or well, I guess 600, close to 600. So thanks to everyone who helped me out and who talked with me, all the friends I've made. It's been an incredible journey so far, and I don't want it to end, to be honest. So keep being creative, and I will catch you in the next bookish video.